Caryn Chandler, thought she was walking into a legal battle she couldn't lose. She never realized the battle wasn't real. It was a courtroom mirage designed to make her convict herself. For years, the tensions on Roloff farms have simmered. But what we're hearing from insider reports is that the conflict has moved from the pumpkin patch to the courthouse in a secret war of strategy and deception that is more shocking than anything we have ever seen on television. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is high-stakes legal chess match, and sources close to the Roloff family are suggesting that Amy Roloff just executed a checkmate so brilliant, so ruthless, that it could change everything forever. The story you are about to hear is pieced together from exclusive theories and insider whispers, a narrative of a phantom lawsuit designed for one purpose: to expose years of lies in the most public and permanent way possible. Before we dive into this incredible story, if you love getting the real, behind-the-scenes scoop on the little people, big world universe, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to LPBW Update. We're dedicated to bringing you the deep dives and exclusive analysis you won't find anywhere else. Now, let's get into the takedown of the century. To understand the genius and the sheer audacity of this plan, we have to go back to the source of the conflict: the sale of the farm, the bitter negotiations, the accusations. It all left a wound that never truly healed. For Amy, according to sources familiar with her thinking, it wasn't just about the money or the property. It was about the narrative. She felt that for years, a story had been spun, a story where she was portrayed as difficult, unreasonable, and the obstacle to progress. Meanwhile, Caryn Chandler, once the farm manager and now Matt's fiancée, had positioned herself as the stabilizing force, the one who truly understood the business and Matt's vision. Amy believed this narrative was built on a foundation of subtle manipulations and outright lies, but she had no way to prove it. How do you fight a whisper campaign? How do you challenge a version of history that has been carefully constructed over a decade? You can't do it on a reality show, and you can't do it in a family argument. Amy, guided by a new and incredibly sharp legal team, decided she had to change the battlefield. She would force the lies out of the shadows and into the one place where they could be officially dismantled: a court of law. The plan, which legal insiders are calling the ghost lawsuit, was born from a simple but profound understanding of Caryn's personality, her overconfidence, and her deep-seated need to be seen as the victor. Amy's attorneys theorized that if presented with a threat, Caryn wouldn't just defend herself, she would attack. She would feel compelled to not just win, but to annihilate Amy's position, to prove once and for all that she was the victim and Amy was the aggressor. And in that aggressive overreach, she would make mistakes. She would lie. The bait had to be perfect. It couldn't be something as monumental as the farm sale itself. That would be too complex and too emotionally charged. It needed to be smaller, something from the past that was just plausible enough to be believable. They found it in a box of old farm business records, a minor contract dispute from Amy's final years of co-owning the farm. It was a disagreement over profit sharing from a third-party vendor during pumpkin season. The contract was ambiguously worded, and while Amy had let it go at the time, her lawyers saw it as the perfect Trojan horse. It was a legitimate-looking issue, but ultimately, it was small enough that a protracted legal battle would seem illogical. It was the perfect lure. The next step was to leak the strategy. This is where the artistry of the long con comes into play. According to our sources, Amy's legal team orchestrated what appeared to be an accidental security breach. A junior paralegal on their team mistakenly sent an internal memo discussing the potential lawsuit to the wrong email list, a list that included a vendor who had connections to one of Caryn's close friends. The memo was carefully crafted. It outlined a legal strategy that made Amy look aggressive and a little desperate, claiming she was seeking significant damages for this old contract dispute. It was designed to look like an amateurish, emotionally driven lawsuit. Within 48 hours, the leaked memo had made its way, as predicted, directly to Caryn Chandler and Matt Roloff. As Amy's team had anticipated, Caryn didn't just laugh it off. She saw red. To her, this was Amy once again trying to undermine the farm, trying to squeeze money out of Matt, and trying to rewrite history. Her arrogance blinded her to the possibility that it could be a trap. All she saw was an opportunity to finally and legally put Amy in her place. She immediately contacted her and Matt's high-powered legal team and gave them a single, furious directive. Crush this. Don't just defend, countersue, and expose Amy for the saboteur she has always been. This was the moment the trap sprung. Caryn's decision to launch a preemptive countersuit was the critical error Amy's team was counting on. While Amy's lawsuit was still just a phantom, a rumor based on a leaked memo, Caryn was about to create a very real legal case, one that would require her to provide evidence and sworn testimony. And because she had no real evidence of Amy sabotaging the farm, she would have to create it. Caryn and her legal team went to work building what can only be described as a mountain of manufactured lies. The foundational lie of her countersuit was that Amy, during her time as farm manager and co-owner, had engaged in a years-long campaign of business sabotage. Caryn claimed Amy's actions were motivated by jealousy and a desire to see Matt's business ventures fail. But to make this claim hold up in court, she needed proof. So she created it. The first phase involved fabricating a digital paper trail. Sophisticated forgeries were created. Emails, supposedly from Amy's old farm account, were written with dates and times carefully backdated. One fake email showed Amy instructing a key supplier for pumpkin season to delay a critical shipment of supplies, with the intention of causing chaos on opening weekend. Another fabricated email chain seemed to show Amy turning down a lucrative corporate event booking without consulting Matt, costing the farm a significant amount of revenue. These emails were meticulously crafted to look real, right down to the email signatures and formatting from that time period. The next phase was to create the illusion of human corroboration. Caryn drafted a series of employee complaints against Amy. She used the names of former seasonal employees, people who had long since left the state and would be difficult to track down. These doctored complaints detailed fictional events where Amy allegedly created a hostile work environment, purposely gave incorrect instructions to staff to undermine Matt's authority, and spoke ill of Caryn to other workers. Caryn was building a fictional history, brick by brick, creating a world in which she was the long-suffering manager trying to protect the farm from its destructive co-owner. All the while, Amy's team did nothing. They had filed an initial notice of intent to sue with the court, a simple preliminary document that signals a potential lawsuit is coming. It's a public record designed to be seen by Caryn's team. But, crucially, they never officially served the papers to Matt and Caryn. This is a key legal distinction. Without being served, there was no active lawsuit from Amy that Caryn needed to respond to. But blinded by rage and overconfidence, Caryn's team didn't wait. They took Amy's notice of intent as a declaration of war and formally filed their massive countersuit against Amy. By doing this, Caryn officially initiated a legal proceeding. She was now the plaintiff in her own countersuit. She was the one making the claims. She was the one who would have to prove her case. Amy's team could now sit back and watch. They didn't have to prove their non-existent contract dispute. All they had to do was let Caryn build her case on a foundation of lies, and then, at the perfect moment, pull the rug out from under her. The chessboard was set, the pieces were in motion, the trap was laid. The next phase of the legal battle was the discovery process. and at its heart was the deposition. A deposition is a formal, out-of-court testimony given under oath. Everything said is recorded by a court reporter and carries the same legal weight as testimony given in a courtroom. Lying in a deposition is perjury, a felony. Amy's legal team knew that Caryn's arrogance would make her an eager participant. She would see it as her chance to finally tell her truth and have it entered into the official record. The day of the deposition arrived. It took place in a sterile conference room in a downtown Portland law office. On one side of the long, polished table sat Caryn, flanked by her two senior attorneys. She appeared confident, prepared, even defiant. On the other side sat Amy and her lead counsel. Amy was quiet, composed, letting her attorney run the show. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The court reporter swore Caryn in, and the questioning began. For hours, Amy's lawyer gently guided Caryn through her claims. The lawyer's demeanor was disarming, almost friendly. He wasn't aggressive or accusatory. He was simply asking her to clarify the details in her counter-suit. Ms. Chandler, could you walk me through the events of April 15th, 2017? In your filing, you state you personally overheard a phone call where Ms. Roloff attempted to sabotage a shipment. Caryn, full of self-assurance, leaned into the microphone. Yes, that's correct. I was in the farm office that morning, catching up on paperwork. Amy came in. She was agitated. I heard her on the phone with our main pumpkin distributor. She specifically used the words, "hold the shipment," and "we're not ready." I knew immediately she was trying to create a problem for our opening weekend to make Matt look bad. The lawyer nodded, scribbling a note. And you are certain about this date, April 15th, 2017? Absolutely certain, Caryn said, without a hint of hesitation. It's seared into my memory. It was a clear example of her sabotage. The lawyer moved on. Let's talk about the employee complaints you submitted as evidence. Specifically, the one from a Mr. John Doe, a former foreman. He alleges that Miss Roloff instructed him to misplace vital irrigation equipment. Did you speak with Mr. Doe directly? My team handled the direct contact, Caryn replied smoothly, but he provided a sworn statement which we have filed. He was afraid to come forward at the time, but he wanted the truth to be known. He was loyal to Matt and the farm. On and on it went. For 6 hours, Caryn spun her web of lies. She committed to dozens of specific factual claims. She cited dates, times, conversations, and the names of individuals. She painted a vivid, detailed picture of Amy's alleged treachery. With every answer, she was unknowingly tying another knot in the noose she was creating for herself. Amy's lawyer wasn't just taking notes, he was ticking boxes on a checklist. Each lie Caryn told under oath was a lie he already had irrefutable evidence to disprove. He was letting her build the pyre of her own credibility, and soon he would be the one to light the match. While Caryn was confidently perjuring herself, Amy's legal team was holding a treasure trove of truth, an arsenal of evidence they had been quietly gathering for months. They had been working in the background, anticipating every lie Caryn would tell and preparing the smoking gun to refute it. Their investigation was surgical, silent, and devastatingly effective. They weren't just planning to win a case, they were planning to expose a criminal conspiracy. The deposition transcript, with its pages and pages of Caryn's sworn testimony, was the final piece of the puzzle. It was the legally binding record of her fabrications. Now, the time had come to reveal the truth, and the fallout would be more catastrophic than Caryn could have ever imagined. The game was about to enter its final, brutal phase. The ghost lawsuit had served its purpose. Now, the real legal reckoning was about to begin. The courtroom mirage was about to evaporate, leaving Caryn Chandler alone in a desert of her own lies, with the vultures of the justice system beginning to circle overhead. The trap was set, the testimony was recorded, and the real evidence was about to come to light. The deposition concluded, and Caryn Chandler left the conference room feeling victorious. She believed she had masterfully laid out her case, solidifying the narrative of her victimhood and Amy's villainy onto the permanent court record. Her lawyers were pleased, confident that the sheer volume of her detailed testimony would be overwhelming. They had no idea that every word she spoke under oath had been meticulously cross-referenced against a mountain of contradictory, irrefutable evidence that Amy's team was waiting to deploy. The reports we've received from sources close to the legal proceedings describe what happened next as a strategic demolition. It wasn't a rebuttal, it was an obliteration of Caryn's entire case and her credibility. The first domino to fall was the lie about April 15, 2017. This was the date Caryn had seared into her memory, the day she swore she was in the farm office and overheard Amy sabotaging a pumpkin shipment. With chilling precision, Amy's legal team prepared their first bombshell. It was a package of documents containing certified copies of Amy Roloff's flight records, passport stamps, and credit card statements. On April 15, 2017, Amy Roloff was not in the farm office in Oregon. She wasn't even in the United States. She was on day 4 of a 10-day vacation in Rome, Italy, with 2 of her closest friends. The evidence was absolute. There were photos of her at the Coliseum timestamped by the digital camera. There were credit card receipts from a restaurant near the Trevi Fountain. There was a copy of her passport stamp from Leonardo da Vinci Fiumicino Airport. Caryn's most vivid, most certain memory, the one she swore to under oath, was not just a mistake. It was a physical and geographical impossibility. It was a provable, calculated lie. Next, Amy's team turned their attention to the so-called employee complaints. Their investigators had spent months tracking down the former seasonal workers Caryn had named in her fabricated evidence. One by one, they found them. The former foreman, John Doe, was now a construction manager in Arizona. He was shocked to hear his name had been used. He not only denied ever witnessing Amy sabotage anything, but he provided a signed and notarized affidavit stating that he had always found Amy to be a fair and competent manager. He stated, under penalty of perjury, that the sworn statement Caryn's team had filed with the court was a complete forgery and that he had never spoken to anyone from their legal team. The story was the same for every other employee Caryn had named. Amy's lawyers collected a stack of signed affidavits, each one legal dagger shredding Caryn's manufactured evidence. The people she had used as pawns in her fictional narrative were now on the record, under oath, calling her a liar. The digital evidence was dismantled with equal precision. The fake emails Caryn had created were subjected to a forensic analysis by a tech expert. The expert's report was damning. He found that while the emails were cleverly disguised, the underlying metadata, the digital fingerprint within every file, told the real story. The emails had not been created in 2016 or 2017 as they claimed. They had been created on a specific computer just 3 months prior, shortly after Amy's leaked lawsuit memo had made its way to Caryn. The expert even traced the IP address of the computer that created the forgeries, and according to our inside sources, it led directly back to a device owned by the Chandler Roloff household. This is where the story takes an unexpected and dramatic turn. Inside Matt and Caryn's own legal camp, a crisis of conscience was brewing. A junior associate on the legal team, a young, idealistic lawyer barely 2 years out of law school, began to have serious doubts. His job was to organize the evidence for submission to the court, and the more he looked at the files, the more his stomach turned. He noticed the inconsistencies in the email headers. He saw that the signatures on the employee complaints looked suspiciously similar. He was being asked to file documents he increasingly believed to be fraudulent. He was being asked to help his client commit a crime. He raised his concerns with a senior partner at the firm, expecting guidance. Instead, he was met with a cold warning. He was told that the client, Caryn Chandler, was adamant about the evidence and that his job was not to question it, but to file it. The pressure was immense. He was being instructed to suborn perjury, a disbarable and potentially criminal offense. Faced with an impossible ethical choice, risk his career by staying silent or risk his career by speaking up, he chose the latter. He couldn't be a party to a fraud on the court. That night, he drafted his resignation, but he did one more thing. He compiled all of his concerns, his notes on the suspicious documents, and the senior partner's instruction to ignore them, and he sent it all in an anonymous package to the Oregon State Bar Association. He was blowing the whistle on his own firm and his own client. This internal betrayal would later serve as a powerful corroboration of Amy's claims, a voice from inside Caryn's own camp admitting the evidence was a sham. With their arsenal of truth locked and loaded, and with the anonymous tip from the junior lawyer now sitting with the state bar, Amy's team was ready to end the game. They requested a pretrial hearing with the judge in his chambers. Caryn and her lawyers walked in, still confident, assuming this was a routine scheduling conference. They were wrong. Amy's lawyer stood up and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we have filed a motion this morning. We wish to formally withdraw our lawsuit against the defendants." A wave of smug relief washed over Caryn's face. She looked at Matt and smirked. They thought they had won, that Amy had finally backed down. But Amy's lawyer wasn't finished. "However, Your Honor," he continued, his voice now firm and cold, "we have also filed a second motion, a motion for sanctions against the plaintiff of the countersuit, Ms. Caryn Chandler, for filing a frivolous, fraudulent, and perjurious claim, and for a deliberate and malicious attempt to defraud this court." He then began to lay out the evidence. He placed the binder with Amy's passport stamps and flight records on the judge's desk, right next to the transcript of Caryn's deposition where she swore Amy was in Oregon. He presented the stack of notarized affidavits from the former employees, directly contradicting Caryn's claims. He submitted the forensic expert's report on the fabricated emails. The judge's expression shifted from professional detachment to stunned disbelief, and then to a cold, simmering fury. He looked from the evidence to Caryn, whose face had gone pale. The confident smirk had been replaced by a mask of pure terror. She was speechless. Her lawyers were scrambling, objecting, but they had no answers. They had been caught completely off guard. They had been so focused on fighting the ghost lawsuit that they never realized Amy's team was building a real criminal case against their client. The judge, after reviewing the evidence in silence for a long, tense moment, finally spoke. His voice was low and carried a weight that filled the entire room. "In my 15 years on the bench," he began, "I have seen contentious litigation. I have seen parties stretch the truth, but I have rarely, if ever, seen such a blatant, comprehensive, and malicious campaign of fabrication designed to weaponize this court for a personal vendetta. This is not a matter of conflicting testimony. This is a mountain of provable lies, submitted under the penalty of perjury." He paused, looking directly at Caryn. "Ms. Chandler, the legal system is not your personal playground. Your actions represent an egregious assault on the very foundations of our justice system." Then came the final, devastating blow. "I am granting the motion for sanctions," the judge declared. "But this matter goes far beyond financial penalties. I am taking the extraordinary step of referring this entire case file, including the deposition transcript, the fabricated evidence, and this hearing's record, directly to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation. I am recommending they pursue charges of felony perjury, fabricating physical evidence, and conspiracy to suborn perjury." The legal battle was over, but Caryn Chandler's nightmare was just beginning. The ghost lawsuit had vanished, its purpose served. It had successfully lured her into a trap of her own making, and now the full force of the state's criminal justice system was about to descend upon her. The news, when it finally broke, sent shockwaves through the little people Big world community. Caryn Chandler, the woman who had positioned herself as the matriarch in waiting of Roloff Farms, was indicted on multiple felony counts. The anonymous tip from the junior lawyer had triggered a separate investigation by the state bar into her legal firm, placing Matt Roloff's own attorneys in jeopardy. Amy Roloff remained silent through it all. She had won, but not in the way anyone expected. She didn't win a monetary settlement or a piece of land. She had won something far more significant: the truth. She had expertly used the legal system as a scalpel to excise the lies that had plagued her for years, proving her case not by arguing, but by creating an environment where her opponent's own deceit would become her public conviction. The legal grandmaster had checkmated her opponent, leaving Caryn not just defeated, but facing the terrifying prospect of trading her life on the farm for a life in a prison cell. So we have to ask the question again: was Amy's legal trap a stroke of absolute genius, a masterclass in strategy that served a just end? Or was it a dangerous and unethical manipulation of the legal system, using the courts as a stage for personal revenge? Is it okay to set a trap, even if the person who falls into it is guilty? This was an incredibly complex and potentially risky strategy, a high-stakes gamble that paid off in the most dramatic way possible. Let me know what you think in the comments below. This is one of the most complex stories we've ever covered, and I want to hear your take. Was Amy justified, or did she go too far? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to LPBW Update for more exclusive deep dives that you won't find anywhere else. The indictment of Caryn Chandler was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a public war. The carefully constructed courtroom mirage had evaporated, replaced by the harsh, unflattering reality of a criminal investigation. For Amy Roloff, the ghost lawsuit had served its purpose. She had not sought a financial victory, but a victory of truth, and she had achieved it in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. Now she could retreat, allowing the wheels of justice, which she had so expertly set in motion, to turn. But for Caryn, and by extension, Matt Roloff, the battle was just beginning, and it was a battle for her freedom. The immediate aftermath, according to sources who witnessed the fallout, was a scene of pure chaos and disbelief within the Chandler-Roloff household. Matt Roloff, who had viewed Amy's initial legal rumblings as a mere annoyance, a final desperate gasp from his ex-wife, was now confronted with a catastrophe. His fiancée, the woman he had defended for years, was facing serious felony charges. His legal team was in disarray, facing its own investigation from the state bar, and the reputation of his farm, his life's work, was being dragged through the mud. His first reaction, we are told, was not anger at Caryn, but a deep, seething rage directed at Amy. He saw this not as Caryn being caught in a lie, but as Amy orchestrating a masterful, cruel, and unforgivable frame-up. He couldn't or wouldn't accept that Caryn had fabricated the evidence. In his mind, Amy had somehow faked her own alibi, coerced former employees, and planted the false metadata on their computer. He was a man drowning, and instead of reaching for a life raft of truth, he chose to anchor himself to Caryn's sinking ship of lies. This decision created an immediate and permanent chasm within the Roloff family. Zach and Tori, who had already distanced themselves from the farm due to their own conflicts with Matt and Caryn, reportedly saw the news as a dark and troubling validation of their feelings. For years, they had felt a shift in the family dynamic, a sense of being marginalized, and had long suspected that Caryn's influence was a source of tension. While they took no public joy in the situation, sources close to them say it solidified their resolve to build their own life far from the farm's toxic politics. They were out, and this event bolted the door behind them. Jeremy and Audrey, always more aligned with a self-sufficient, independent lifestyle, were said to be deeply troubled. They had tried to maintain a neutral, if distant, relationship with both parents. This news, however, forced an impossible choice. To support Matt was to implicitly condone Caryn's alleged actions, or at the very least, to stand against Amy's pursuit of what she called the truth. The situation was a tear in the fabric of the family, forcing everyone to choose a side in a war they never wanted. The Roloff children were no longer just the kids from a reality show. They were the fractured heirs of a legacy now tainted by a criminal scandal. The media, of course, descended like vultures. Tabloid headlines screamed, "Roloff farm, feud explodes, Caryn charged with perjury," and "Amy's revenge inside the secret legal trap that could send Caryn to prison." The story was irresistible. It had family drama, reality TV stars, and a stunning legal twist. The carefully curated image of Roloff Farms as a whimsical family destination was shattered. It was now the scene of a crime, a place of betrayal and deceit. The pressure on the family and on the network that aired their show was immense. How could you continue to film a wholesome family program when the matriarch-to-be was out on bail and facing a felony trial? In the midst of this firestorm, two separate legal fortresses were being built. Amy's camp was one of quiet, steely resolve. Her lawyers had played their hand perfectly. They had done their work in the shadows, and now that the case was in the hands of the district attorney, their official role was over. They had passed the baton to the state. Amy, on their advice, remained completely silent publicly. She gave no interviews. She made no celebratory statements. Her silence was, in itself, a powerful statement. It conveyed that this was not about revenge for her. It was about the restoration of truth. She was letting the facts, which she had so brilliantly unearthed, speak for themselves. She had built her case on a foundation of irrefutable proof, and now she trusted the system to do the rest. Caryn's camp, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of frantic activity. Matt, using the considerable wealth from the farm, hired a new, high-priced criminal defense team for Caryn. These weren't family law attorneys. These were aggressive, high-profile litigators who specialized in no-win scenarios. Their strategy became clear almost immediately. They would not be arguing the facts of Caryn's original countersuit. That case was toxic, a lost cause. Instead, they would build a new narrative. Their defense would be that Caryn Chandler was the victim of an elaborate, vindictive, and technologically sophisticated conspiracy orchestrated by Amy Roloff. This new defense strategy was breathtaking in its audacity. They would argue that the flight records were forgeries, that the passport stamps were faked. They would claim that Amy's team had hacked their computer and planted the fabricated emails themselves, creating false metadata to frame Caryn. They would allege that the former employees had been bribed or intimidated into signing false affidavits. And as for the junior lawyer who had blown the whistle, they would paint him as a disgruntled, incompetent employee who was either a willing participant in Amy's conspiracy or was manipulated by her cunning legal team. In essence, their only play was to accuse Amy of committing the very crimes Caryn was charged with, but on a much grander and more complex scale. It was a Hail Mary defense, an attempt to muddy the waters so thoroughly that a jury might be left with just enough reasonable doubt to acquit. The district attorney's office, however, was not easily swayed by these tactics. They were methodical. They took the evidence referred by the judge and began their own painstaking verification process. They subpoenaed the airline directly. The airline confirmed Amy's flight to Rome. They contacted the Department of State. The passport stamps were verified. They sent their own forensic team to analyze the metadata on the emails. They not only confirmed the findings of Amy's expert, but with their enhanced resources were able to uncover even more digital breadcrumbs leading back to Caryn. The most significant piece of evidence they uncovered was a series of deleted search engine queries from a device on the Roloff farm network. The searches included phrases like how to backdate an email, create fake legal document, and penalty for perjury in Oregon. The prosecution's star witness, of course, would be the young lawyer who had resigned from Caryn's original legal team. He was no longer anonymous. Once the DA's investigation began, he was granted immunity in exchange for his full cooperation. He provided a detailed timeline of events, describing the pressure he was under from the senior partners and Caryn's insistence that the fraudulent documents be filed with the court. His testimony would provide a motive and a behind-the-scenes look at the conspiracy that would be devastatingly powerful to a jury. He was the insider, the voice of conscience from the enemy's camp, and his credibility was impeccable. As the pretrial motions began, the true depth of Amy's strategy came into focus. To fully appreciate the genius of the ghost lawsuit, one has to understand the psychology behind it. Amy and her team had not just predicted Caryn's actions, they had weaponized her own personality against her. They knew Caryn's deep-seated need to be seen as the true power behind the Roloff throne, the one who saved the farm from Amy's supposed incompetence. They knew her pride would not allow her to ignore a threat, no matter how small. And they knew her arrogance would lead her to believe she could create her own version of reality and make it stick. Sources familiar with Amy's thinking during this period paint a picture of a woman who had spent years feeling gaslighted. There were countless small incidents, anecdotes that never made it to air that formed the backdrop for this high-stakes legal gambit. There were whispers of Caryn, in her farm manager days, subtly misrepresenting Amy's decisions to Matt, framing them as emotional or irrational. There were stories of business ideas Amy proposed being dismissed, only to be repackaged and presented by Caryn weeks later as her own. There was the constant creeping feeling of being slowly erased from the history of the very farm she had helped build. The ghost lawsuit wasn't just about the farm sale or a single contract. It was about reclaiming her own history, about ending the gaslighting once and for all. She couldn't win the battle of whispers, so she changed the venue to a place where only documented proof mattered. She created a controlled environment, the legal equivalent of a laboratory, designed to expose a lie she knew was there but could never previously prove. The criminal case against Caryn was now moving inexorably toward a trial. The DA, confident in their mountain of evidence, made a final plea offer, plead guilty to one count of felony perjury, and they would recommend probation with no jail time. It was a generous offer, a chance for Caryn to avoid the risk of a long prison sentence. But once again, her pride and Matt's unwavering belief in the frame-up narrative led her to reject it. She would not admit guilt. She would roll the dice in a court of law. She would stand before a jury of 12 strangers and try to convince them that she was the victim, that the mountain of evidence against her was all part of her ex-husband's wife's diabolical plan. The stage was set for a trial that would dwarf anything the family had ever experienced on reality television. This would not be a carefully edited storyline for ratings. This would be a real-life courtroom drama with devastating permanent consequences. The prosecution would lay out its case with surgical precision. The impossible alibi, the forensic data, the sworn testimony of betrayed former employees, and the damning account of the lawyer who refused to be part of the crime. Caryn's defense would counter with a grand conspiracy theory, a narrative of a woman so consumed by jealousy that she would commit a series of complex felonies just to frame her romantic rival. It all came back to that central fascinating question. Was Amy's plan a righteous act of a woman pushed too far, using the only tool at her disposal to bring a hidden truth to light? Or was it a cynical and dangerous manipulation of the justice system, an act of entrapment that, while successful, sets a troubling precedent? The law is meant to be a shield, not a sword, a tool for resolving disputes, not a baited trap for creating them. Amy's supporters would argue that She simply created a stage, and Caryn willingly walked onto it and delivered a monologue of lies. Her detractors would claim she lit a match, knowing Caryn was standing in a room full of gasoline. The legal ethics are murky, but the outcome was crystal clear. The saga of the ghost lawsuit serves as a stunning conclusion to one chapter of the Roloff family story and a terrifying beginning to another. Caryn Chandler thought she was walking into a legal battle over a minor contract dispute. She was wrong. She was walking into a referendum on her own character, a test of her own honesty. And in that test, she failed spectacularly, convicting herself with every sworn lie she told. The courtroom mirage had faded, and now all that remained was the cold, hard reality of a criminal trial, a fractured family legacy, and the unanswered question of whether the brilliant, ruthless trap Amy Roloff had set was a stroke of genius or a deal with the devil. The world was about to watch and find out.